Meta may hold back on the EU, Apple intelligence training, and identifying social engineering. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by the MacVoices Slack, available to all patrons of MacVoices. Sign up today at patreon.com/MacVoices. So again, following on the meta theme, but this also is relevant to something that's going on in the Apple world. Meta may hold back its next-gen AI models from the EU, which sounds suspiciously like what Apple is sort of doing with the EU as well. We're going to find out what exactly your rules are, and then maybe we will, maybe we won't. Is this part of is this the first? Are those two the first in a trend? Or am I just trying to pick a fight?
No, I can see that. They're playing by the same rules, so you can understand how they'd have a similar reaction.
Well, we're having this conversation on the MacVoices Slack this week about the EU and whether the EU and the UK parting ways. Did it take any clout away from one, the other, or both? Since they are theoretically a little bit diminished, since they're not one, they're now two. And is the EU feeling like they've got to try to push back on some of this and regain some credibility?
Maybe.
I don't know. And do you pick a fight with some of the world's largest companies? I don't know. It just seems really, really unusual.
I mean, there's always that problem of how do you regulate some new technology that hasn't been out there before? And usually, it comes out, it ends up doing something you didn't anticipate, and then you try to work around that. They seem to be kind of jumping forward and say, hey, we're going to put out a bunch of rules ahead of time and we'll get a jump on this. But, sometimes I'm thinking they hadn't really thought through or don't really know what this technology is or what it does. Yet they're still going to write some rules. So,
and Web and Jim might be to better comment on this, but how much can the EU make them do things? I'm talking about Apple and Meta. No, you must release your AI in our, in this area to run.
Web, Jim?
Go ahead, Jim. You're muted.
Oh.
I guess that's up to the courts.
Wow. Okay.
Wow, what?
Well, Marty asked it in an interesting way. Can they order you that you have to deploy a product? Can they tell Coca-Cola that they have to release a new Coke Zero?
Secret formula.
Yeah. Well, not even going to go that far, Webb, but just if Coke is selling Coke Zero in the U.S., do they have to sell it in the U.K.? Do they have to sell it in the EU? Can a court order that?
I wouldn't think so, but I'm not a European. I'm not any kind of lawyer, and especially not a European one.
I don't know. You would think that everybody would want this stuff deployed as evenly as possible, so that their home companies, the companies in their country, would remain competitive. But instead, it seems like they're pushing back on some of this, and we're back to our discussions of previous weeks about global sales-sized fines. Try saying that 3 times fast. Where you start talking about, we're not just going to talk about a penalty or a percentage in our country. We're going to talk about a percentage of everything you make around the globe. That's going to be the penalty poured into our coffers.
Well, let me know when somebody pays that.
Yeah, we'll see. This is another one that had the world a little bit stirred up. And it sort of then got back down on that Apple Intelligence was trained on stolen YouTube data and scraped from other sources. Then they turned around and said, well, no, not really. And of course, these are clickbaity headlines too, because they're saying Apple did this, Apple did that. In fact, Apple purchased this data from a third-party company, and then it's not completely clear, at least that I've seen. I've not seen anything definitive that said that Apple knew this was scraped before they used it. But at the end of the day, it looks like it was not used to train Apple Intelligence. It was used to train. It was used to train some of the open source models that Apple was releasing. Comments, thoughts? Anybody care?
Probably should, but
Jim, you were fired up earlier. Now you're just mellowed out. Great.
Well, it's a good sign that none of the primary models that they're using in the OS have questionable material, as far as we know. So, yeah, I mean, it's more clickbaity than anything else. Is it a problem that a model that they might push out that other people play with has a problem? Maybe. I mean, I think that might take on more importance later, but it doesn't sound like it was really something intended to be used to produce a product, more of a kind of test things out, play with this. And that, to me, it seems like it's more of a problem that all of the early researchers had, just grabbing whatever data was lying around and easy to get and not paying any attention at all to who owned it. And that went on for years. Not saying it's good.
Reference. Yeah, they make reference in the article about people scraping Enron emails and analyzing the data from that.
Yeah.
Well, but hasn't a lot of information been scraped from all of us by the credit card companies and the marketing companies to sell us things? I mean, I feel like the conversation just came full circle back to when it's an AI doing the scraping or when it's an automated scraping. But on the other hand, isn't that well, I'm not sure what your large grocery chains are where you are, but isn't that what the large grocery chains do through tracking with my loyalty card what I buy, and then try to target me with advertising? Isn't that the same kind of scraping or the same kind of data collection?
Well, I think it's maybe different. I mean, I don't like either one of them, but it's one thing to say, okay, you're going to look at my behavior and then use that to try and help me decide what products to buy. Sometimes that, could be helpful theoretically. I'm not sure I want that kind of help, but but if you're talking about like, okay, I'm going to take, Marquise Brownlee's videos and turn that into some sort of content that I can turn around and sell to the rest of the world, that seems like a different kind of a thing than, helping somebody pick out which kind of chips they buy at the grocery store.
But Jim, I guess maybe I'm not clear on what training means. I mean, training to me doesn't say that someone's going to take what they got from Brownlee and try to teach me how to create videos in his style. It's more that it's trying to train the AI how to react to whatever query I throw at it. And maybe I'm not explaining it well. I see those as two different things.
I don't think I wasn't thinking they would would try to train somebody how to make Marquise Brownlee videos, but I'm not sure why I think that. Maybe they would, but they might well make a product that is like, yeah, don't bother looking at Marquise videos. Just ask us the question and we'll tell you the answer.
Okay, that's a fair one. My analogies are terrible, but I'll just go there anyway. But
it's kind of like the controversial practice of you do a Google search, and Google will give you answers that it got from other people's websites, but now you don't that website's not getting a view because they've pulled the information off of that website and they're giving it to you right in the search window. I'm not a fan of although I'll use that information, but it's not that great for they're stealing that information.
Other than private data, Web, I want to look at you and I'll look at David too. Other than personally identifiable data, how strongly do you guys feel about the positions you have with your respective companies about having some of your data potentially scraped, assuming it's not personally identifiable? And one other caveat, and assuming that you can't have an action leveled against you because you allowed it or permitted it.
Well, forgive me, I hadn't had a deep thought on this, so I'm kind of shooting from the hip, which is always dangerous. But first of all, a lot of what I have is considered personally identifiable information. That's really kind of the stock and trade of what it is that I do. So trying to have something outside those parameters is kind of tough. Now, that being said, as these systems learn, and let's take out the identifiable information, and now we're just going to look at health histories of 1,000 people, not identifying them, but identifying the history. That's that's been going on in my industry for more than since this AI thing's been coming up. And that's how one of the ways that the actuaries define their skill is how to manage these situations where you take a large population, and I've been through this conversation before on this podcast where you take 100 people, that 10 of them are going to have some dread disease, 2 of them are going to get hit by a bus, 80 of them are going to live for another year. So it's just kind of and that's been done. The only thing that AI does is help kind of make that process a little bit easier. But, we've been using computers and feeding data in the computers in my industry for a long time. I wanted to point something out on this Apple Insider article, and I'm kind of switching gears on you, Chuck, but I was going through some of the user comments, and the last one was posted by a guy named Charisma, Carisma, and his second to the last sentence was something that I found kind of interesting. You're talking about how you teach how these AI systems learn, and Brian, I am not being condescending to your profession when I'm just reading this, but I thought it was interesting. Isn't education, be it for humans or AI, absorbing existing information to learn and in some cases produce original ideas? We think about the scary side of AI, but there's also this other aspect where it's just taking mounds and mounds of big data and trying to distill it. It's an interesting comment, but it does go back to a couple sentences earlier, is that aren't educators just taking information that they've read and learned and relaying that on, and hopefully someone comes up with an original thought from it. Interesting concept. So I just thought it was interesting, but I've said on here before, I think the biggest problem that I have with AI is that it's talking about intelligence, and I don't think it has any real intelligence. I think it's just pulling in a lot of data and kind of sorting through it. So a lot of if-then processing at the end of the day. So, okay, David, your turn.
Yeah, Dave.
Well, I mean, I can't really directly comment on what my company does or does not do as far as that goes, but generally I would say, the scraping and data, I think companies are looking at them all the time. And the other thing is too, many companies have proprietary data that they have to protect at all times. That information does get out there; it's shared, but it's watermarked and protected. So you can't print it, you can't share it, you can't So they do have some protections in there. So, but in general, I think many companies are looking at that as far as protection when it comes to the data scraping. But there's always those possibilities.
So the
What did Jeff and
is,
Kelly have to say about Tua last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? That they were doing a lot of data scraping and just blatantly plagiarizing. So
yeah, yep.
Yeah,
and that's an interesting point, Webb. That that was plagiarism, as opposed to taking it and distilling it into something else. Unless you count the distillation process as being part of the AI rewriting the articles, then it kind of fits. So Cletus put in the chat room, I think this goes back to that cartoon you put up, which was the XKCD. If an AI scraped bad data and it's been used as a base for it, it's a weak point at some point. It becomes a weak point at some point. AI has taken the info and translated it into unknown tablets. I'm not sure. I think that may be a typo, Cletus, unless I'm not understanding what you're saying. Wayne says, I'm okay with data being scraped as long as the data, PIL, PHL, etc., is pseudo-anonymized or tokenized in some very secure fashion, i.e. AES 256, etc. So, Webb, I can't help but respond to your comment because it's one that I've thought we just have never really brought it up here. But don't we all do that as human beings? Don't we go out on the web, we scrape up data, we read articles, we watch videos, and then we take what we learned and then go apply it to something. It could be baking cookies, could be flying an airplane.
It's kind of like I'm wondering if one of the problems we have is terminology, using the word scrape. It's just like when iTunes first came out and we were taking our CDs and putting it into iTunes. What do we call that? We were ripping. Okay. It's just, you say scrape, and I think that somebody is stealing my data and using it for nefarious means. And that's just, like I said, a language problem and how we take a word and it has a connotation to it. It's someone here may disagree with me. I just thought it was an interesting analogy. So,
no, that's a real good point.
Well,
hey, Jim.
But I think it has some meaning. Because if a website has an API, then somebody can come in and use the API, and that's authorized. So, scraping basically means they've reverse engineered the content of your website to figure out what the format of the data is, and it's not authorized. So, and the same thing, CDs were not, they were not made and sold with the intent that the digital data would be reversed off of them. So,
oh yeah, it's true.
And the same thing for websites. They were intended for humans to look at them, not for another computer to come and those words predate AI. People have been doing, web scraping for a long time. And it just basically means to extract information from a website without using an approved API.
Brian?
I was thinking just in regards to the art of teaching, and the how that information sometimes is. You could argue that, are we looking at basically just replicating that information to our students so the students have the same information? But I think what I've seen over the past really 20 years or so is, as K-12 education has really been looking at the standards and what students should know and be able to do, we're seeing a lot more of those verbs change from, instead of following, having an understanding or having knowledge of something, it's more of the application of that information. What it is that you're doing, judging something, analyzing something, applying something, evaluating something. And so I think you're starting to see that movement where, you could go easily and find that information as a Google search. Sometimes I would tell my students, and now it's AI is even more of an advanced version of this, but I would say, if I could, when I was working with teachers and we were coming up with test questions or what to teach or how to teach students a particular topic, if you could ask the smart assistant, A lady, S lady, what the answer is, you're going to have to change the question, because that could just be looked up. It's too easy. You got to be able to do something with that information.
Eric?
Just because you can get the data doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to figure out how to license it. The data has value. And if it's something produced by one web developer and put on one site, and you say, yeah, I can go through and I can suck it out and I can use it a completely different way, and isn't that great and wonderful? And it's available for so many more people, and I can translate it and I can do all these other great things, but the original person doesn't get anything. If you were to go to YouTube and say, hey, great, I can go and I can save all of these videos and I can put them up on another website and it will have a native interface for the Apple Vision Pro, isn't that wonderful? I've performed a service. I am willing to bet that will not last very long before YouTube gets upset at what you're doing. And they're a big enough company, they can get upset with the form letter. Whereas an individual may or may not know you did anything, and even if they get upset, other than if they happen to know who you are sending off a letter, there's not a lot of recourse. There is value there. There should be compensation that goes to the original artist or the original author, and that's different from a teacher teaching something. At some point, they paid massive amounts of money for who knows how many textbooks every single semester to learn all of that stuff, not to mention paying a university or a tech school to go through training courses. Something was value was exchanged to get that information, which is then reprocessed and presented to students. And it's not an AI, which is not reformulating it in a new way, producing something new. It's a student who might take that information and do something in a completely different media or do something really, really different. That's different.
Guys, we have run way over time. We got off on so many different topics. I do want to throw one last article in, more as a public service than anything. This is a Tidbits article by Adam Angst referencing an Apple document that was published on how to identify social engineering hacks. And I encourage everybody to read Adam's article, then read the Apple document and pay attention, maybe print it out and tack it up somewhere, because I don't know about you all, but I am just constantly bombarded with every kind of phishing method that you can think of, from email to text messages that, something's in the warehouse and they don't have my address, so just please click this link and fill out this form. So take a good hard look at this, because it's just part of our world now that we have to deal with. They're already getting a lot of information out of you. You don't want to give them any more. With that, I want to thank everybody here. I want to thank the folks in the chat room. A lot of great discussions. Oh, and I also wanted to confirm what Cletus was saying. He said he was typing on his phone, and I didn't understand. But apparently I'm sure it's a scholarly organization, has been using AI to read scrolls that they couldn't read, ancient scrolls, and translating them. And probably some of the educators here on the crew may know more about that than I do. But yeah, I've seen articles like that too, where they're able to fill in missing pieces and make sense of things that have been largely lost up to this point. So yeah, real good point, Cletus. Real good point. Let's go around the room, find out where everybody can find you, and then we'll get out of here. So let's just keep the order. David Ginsburg, thank you so much for being here. Glad you made it through CrowdStrike. Where can folks find you?
You can find me at In Touch with iOS at intouchwithios.com. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/intouchwithios. I'm here on Tuesdays, and I'm on the Mac Show on Fridays on the British Tech Network, and I'm on Mastodon at DaveG65 at mastodon.cloud. Thanks, Chuck.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs, thank you for showing up tonight. Where can folks find you?
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. You can often find me here Tuesday evenings, MacVoices Live. This particular week, I believe it just released on the episode of For Mac Guys Only. I was a guest, so I'm on there. And then for social media, you can find me, Brian8944 at mastodon.cloud.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Marty Jencius, I'm glad you felt up to joining us tonight. I hope you feel even better by next Tuesday. Where can folks find you?
You can find me here on Tuesday nights and Thursdays with In Touch with iOS. Also, my Mastodon is Jencius, JENCIUS at mastodon.social. And then 3 podcasts I'm involved in, one with Eric called Vision Profiles that comes out generally Mondays, early Tuesday mornings. And then Tech Savvy Professor and Circular Firing Squad. Find out all that information at thepodtalk.net.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you. Mr. Bolden, Dr. Evil himself, who has sprouted wings during the show. It's either the face palm or the, I don't know what that is, the finger tap or whatever. Where can folks find you?
In my layer. Oh, wait, no. I can be found on Mastodon at EA Bolden at techhub.social. And here on Tuesdays, as Marty said, Mondays with the Vision Profiles podcast.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Jim Ray, thank you for being here tonight. Where can folks find you?
I'll be asleep over there. No. You can find me online. The website is provue.com, PROVUE, or you can find me on Mastodon, at Provue Jim, same PROVUE spelling, at techhub.social.
Thank you, Jim. Later tonight, Jim will be announcing his candidacy on X.
For what?
Well, that's a good question, but it's a detail. Web Bixby, thank you so much for being here. You and your is that supposed to be like a watermelon themed quilt, or because that's what I'm getting out of it because I had watermelon for dinner.
I just take the picture and throw it up there. So
okay, well,
I'm not part of the creative side. So
thank you. Well,
anyway,
where can folks find you?
Marty, I did want you to know that I still have my Pod Talk.
Great, thank you.
I don't have the Apple Vision Pro yet, but I got the cleaning cloth. So, you know what? You can find me on X, Web Bixby at Twitter. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Web. Will you be announcing your candidacy?
For dog catcher.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices Live. We do this craziness every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'd love to have you join us in the chat room at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV. Thanks again to all the folks who came tonight and made the show even better just by their presence and their comments. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.